My dearest listeners, thank you so much for the support you've shown me so far by liking and commenting on my stories, and most especially subscribing. You all have my whole heart, and your support means so much to me. If this is your first time listening to any of my stories, I'm so happy to have you here, and I promise you, it'd be worth it. Now, let me brief you on today's story. Imagine you had always been in love with your best friend, but you knew you could never be together because you were the lowest of the ranks and he was an alpha's heir. By a twisted fate, you both ended up being mated, and everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. You were forced to flee from him and the pack, breaking the bond that connected you, all for the sake of saving him and everyone you loved. But who will save you? As the weeks fly by, a bump grows in your belly. You're pregnant with his child, and you can't help but look ahead to the lonely world you'll have to live in without him by your side. Until one day, your fates decide to entwine again, and you practically stumble into each other. Besties, listen to the story of Aurora.
Aurora's POV. I stared at him as he stood in the light of the bonfire. His hands swayed to the music, desperate not to spill the drink in his hand. He succeeded with a subtlety that overrode thoughts. Landon Sawyer. I have always been in love with him since we were kids, but life had other plans. Hey, what are you looking at? I raised my head, staring at those emerald eyes of his. His white dentition seemed even more perfect than the moonlight shining on the earth. I hadn't realized in my daydreaming that he had moved towards me. Nothing, I answered, stuttering at his sight. Care for a dance? He asked, stretching his hand towards me. I gulped, swallowing my feelings. We were two people of different statuses. I was an omega, the least of the social status in our world, yet the heir to the alpha was asking me for a dance. Are you sure about this? I asked, searching the place with my eyes. You are the son of the alpha. Landon grabbed my hand, pulling me to him. I am the son of the alpha. It means I can do whatever I want, and asking you to dance with me is as much as I want. I smiled at his words as we glided over the floor. His body swayed to the music, rubbing against mine. Landon put his fingers to my lips, stopping me from speaking any further. You are my best friend, and everyone knows. They can't think of stopping me, more when I'm likely to become alpha in the absence of my father. I heaved a sigh at his words, dropping my head on his chest. His words were assuring, and right, but he had to become alpha before I could be sure of it. We danced through the night, pulling closer and closer to each other until I felt something click. It was my soul, intertwining with his. Landon pushed me away, holding me at arm's length with his eyes glowing in the night. I hadn't felt what I was feeling before, but I could feel my soul yearning for him, and in one split moment, it happened as I thought. Mate, the both of us said together in the emptiness of sound. The music had stopped, and it was just the both of us staring at each other, surprised at what was happening. You are my mate, Landon said, his voice increasing in crescendo at the sound of it. He seemed happy about it, but I was the happiest as that was all I had ever wanted. Landon spurned me around as the music resumed. What's going to happen now that we've found out that we are mates? I asked, feeling rumbles in my stomach from being happy. I will tell my parents and the council about it. It should not be a hard matter to decide, Landon said with glee. I nodded as I joined in the dancing. I wanted to trust him, despite knowing how things turned out from the disparity in our ranks. The dance ended on a calm note. The festivities ended with Landon stepping away from me. He would leave, and that was a moment I hated. Seeing him disappear into the throngs of guards and reappear whenever he had the chance. I walked on home with my hands wrapped around him, feeling our bonds intertwine even further. My parents would have to know about it, I thought as I kicked a pebble in front of me. No. The answer came almost immediately to mind. They will know when Landon informed me about how he went. Days passed since that incident. I had thought it would be a merry time for me. Becoming Landon's mate was the best thing that had ever happened to me, but I could feel the rising tension in the air. I stood from my bed at the sound of rocks hitting my window. I opened it to find Landon standing outside, ready to throw another one towards me. Landon! I called out, watching him drop the remaining pebbles to the ground. He moved forward, stopping in front of me. Can I come in? I moved out of the way, watching as he dropped into the room, moving straight to my bed. There was something off about his look, as he looked tired. Is something wrong? Asked as I sat next to him. Landon let out a deep sigh, dropping to the bed with his arms under his head. Everything seems wrong. Something dropped into my stomach at his reply. What is it? I asked as I stared at his emerald eyes glistening in the darkness. Your parents refused me to become your mate? He said nothing. His silence was enough to let me know what the outcome had been as I turned away from him, pulling my knees to my chest and wrapping my arms around them. Landon pushed himself up, staring at my face. It doesn't mean I'm giving up. They only said a few words about. I held my hand to him. You don't have to tell me how it went. I know how it all goes. I'm an Omega. We belong to the lowest caste. No one would want their son to have a life with someone of my level. Landon put his hand to my jaw, lifting my face to stare at him. They are not me. I make my choice the way I see fit, and that includes my love for you. I love you, Aurora, and don't care about what they have to say about it. I could see the genuineness in his eyes as he held me still. His eyes seemed hypnotic, as all I could hear was the beating of my heart. He pulled me in, placing a kiss on my lips. His soft lips tugged against mine, causing me to forget what it was we were discussing. Landon pulled away, staring into my eyes. Forget about how hard it is and let it be. I will find a way to set everything right, he said as he pulled me into another kiss. I gave in to his word, feeling his hand wrap around my neck. My hands shook as he slipped his hand into my dress. I could trust him, as he had never lied to me. His words hung to my mind like anchored. I moaned to his touch with his hands caressing my skin. You are mine, Landon said as he pushed me to the bed. Yes, I am yours, I said, agreeing to his words as I watched him take off his shirt to reveal a welcome body with 6 packs. His hands rubbed his disheveled hair before reaching for his trousers, tugging them away to reveal his bulge. I leaned back, expectant, as he hovered over me. His hand reached for my dress, pulling them until I could feel the wind blowing past my thighs. Do you love me? Landon asked as he leaned downward, kissing my lips while his free hands twisted and pinched at my nipples. Yes, I moaned, finding it hard to answer his question with pleasure coursing through me. How sure are you? He asked, with his weight spreading my thighs about. The answer felt stifled in my mouth as he pushed his loins inside me. I moaned out, digging my nails into his skin. I love you, Landon. A scream threatened to escape my lips as he pulled out, thrusting inside me again. I gasped at his lovemaking, feeling my inside accept him whole. His raspy breathing in my ears was like a sweet symphony as we moved in tandem. I felt it ripple. My body shook to the core as his thrusts increased. I'm coming, Landon grunted, hitting harder. I held my hand around my lips, muffling my increasing need to yell for him not to stop. He pulled away with the feeling of something hot inside me. My body shook with our lovemaking, spasming to my orgasm while Landon laid next to me, trying to catch his breath. I felt his arms wrap around me with his bobbing chest as he tried to control his breath. I love you, Aurora, he said, whispering in my ear. I love you too, I said back, letting my body regain control over itself while a wind blew, cooling the sweats from our body. We laid still, listening to the sound of our breathing until footsteps echoed closer to my door. Aurora. My father banged at the door. What the hell are you doing inside there? Ugh. Girls' things, I said as I stood from my bed, pushing my dress down while Landon hurried his clothes over his body. Well, I need to speak to you right now. My eyes widened as I turned to Landon, who seemed in a fuzz. I chuckled, watching Landon as he struggled to put on his trousers. I'm afraid you will have to wait a while, father. Landon hurried, taking what else he couldn't wear and moving to the window. He placed another kiss on my lips as he crossed his leg over the window. I love you, he said as he jumped through, jogging out into the distance. Aurora. My father growled, and I knew he was pissed off by my delay. Yes, father. I called out as I straightened my dress, putting a bit of cologne on my skin to hide the smell of sex around me. I walked towards the door, opening it to see his scowling face staring at me. How long does it take to do whatever girly thing it was that you are doing? He asked, with his hands flailing around. As long as it takes mother to do hers. Father sighed as he turned around, heading to the living room. Your mother wants you to get some mushroom for her to prepare dinner, he said as he handed me a basket. I sighed as I took it in my hand. My body still shivered from the moment I had with Landon. Why don't we leave it until morning? Father looked at me, shaking his head. Maybe you should be the one facing your mother. I'm too old for all of her drama. I chuckled as I held on to the basket, walking towards the door. Seeing both of them bicker was one thing I wanted in my home. I wanted to be happy with Landon, grow old with him and make sure he does not disobey me. A smile crossed my lips at the thought of it while I moved ahead. The forest welcomed me with the sound of nightlife singing. The wind blew past my ears, with Landon's scent from my skin meeting my nose. The night was a moment of reflection, as everything seemed to remind me of the time we spent. I smiled as I picked the mushroom, gathering enough. This is enough, I said to myself, staring at the mushrooms I had gathered. It seemed enough. I turned back, heading towards the house. Owls hooted in the distance when a bush rippled in front of me. I fell to the ground, shaking in fright as I stared at the man who had appeared in front of me. My hand over my chest as I reached for the mushrooms I had gathered. You scared me. Aurora? The figure asked as he stood still. Yes, I answered, dropping my basket to stare at him. There was something off, especially with the mask on his face. This is where you die, the figure said with a blade swinging out from his side and held up against me. Would I die here? I thought as I stared at the figure holding a blade over my head. It would be over soon, I thought as I waited for the blade to hit, closing my eyes in my last moments. It didn't happen even as I opened my eyes to stare at my attacker. The assassin stopped, staring at me. No hostility poured out of his body as he stared at me. Your association with Landon Sawyer has put you in a difficult position. I gulped as I stared at the masked face. The darkness only made it scarier. Why would my association with Landon put me in a difficult position? The assassin straightened. You don't have the luxury of asking questions, Aurora. There are two options in front of you. As long as you remain here, one of you has to survive. You or Landon. Your death would not bring as much instability as Landon's. What do you want me to do? I asked as my cheeks burned with tears threatening to fall from my cheeks. Landon's safety would come from your disappearance. Which means I have to kill you, the assassin said as he raised his hand in the sky. I don't want to die. I would do anything you want me to do, I said with the dam in my eye, ready to burst. The assassin nodded, dropping his hand to his side. The only thing I want you to do for me, your family, and Landon is to run away. Run away because your life depends on it. Run away because I will always be behind you, ready to snap your neck the moment I see you. The assassin pulled his mask, revealing a clean-cut face. He seemed innocent for the job he was doing. You would hardly believe he was an assassin. This is what I look like, he said, pointing to his face. You will kill me because I know you now, I said, trembling as he reached for me, pulling me to my feet. No. Showing you my face should give you ample time to spot me in the crowd and make a break for it. This is the only good thing I can do for you. My legs knocked against each other as fear reverberated through my body. I was dead. Or as he said, living by his grace and what he deemed good. He put his mask on his face, brandishing his sword once more. You have as much as I can give you to run away from here. Now? I asked, staring at the masked face once more. Now? He growled. I flinched, falling to the ground, scrambling as I turned around. Fear wouldn't let me scream as I headed into the forest. He stood still in the distance. His sword glistened in the moonlight as I ran away. Tears trickled from my eyes. I could do nothing as leaves and tree branches slapped me in the face. Dried leaves rustled on the ground as I made my getaway. His words echoed in my head. I had to make a choice between me and Landon. I turned back to look at him. He was chasing me now with more people at his call. I'm going to die, I muttered to myself as I turned. The tears poured now as I ran forward, gasping for air but finding none. Strength failed my legs, but I had to push on. That assassin had given me a shot at life, but I could not tell I would survive. Help! I screamed as I stumbled into a settlement. Light flashed at my position as I rolled to the ground with a woman standing over me. I grabbed onto her hands, holding it as a source of safety. You are safe here, the woman said, holding onto me. My voice faded into nothing as I stared at her, sucking in air, but nothing came. My body spasmed from tiredness. A darkness, darker than the night, overpowered me. The woman's voice echoed in my head as I faded into the night, screaming in terror, but no words came. He's going to kill me. I woke up, screaming, with my hands flailing in the air. No one is going to kill you, a lady's voice came from beside me. I turned, wrapping my hands around my knees while I watched the lady in front of me. She flashed me a smile as she put some things into place. I looked around, staring at the room I was in. It felt tight as my eyes darted constantly. The lady pushed a table in front of me before turning around to do something else. You can call me Esmeralda, the woman said as she dropped a steaming bowl of chicken soup in front of me. You need to eat. Your face looks pale. I stared at the food and at the woman. What if it was a trick? I would not know until I had eaten. The woman nodded at me, urging me to eat. She took a spoonful, dropping it into her mouth like she could tell what I was thinking. It is not poison, and I see no reason I had to kill a young girl like you. I nodded as I took the bowl in my hand. Be careful. It is hot. I was downing spoonfuls of it before her warnings would reach my ears. She smiled, sitting next to me. How long have I been out? I asked as I scooped spoonfuls from the soup she had placed in front of me. All night and all morning. Esmeralda answered. You seemed pretty exhausted when I found you. It seemed someone was after you. I dropped the plate as I recalled the horrors of the night. It went downhill from the time I had spent with Landon. I couldn't even tell what my parents would feel when they found out I was missing. Yes. I had to run for my life. Esmeralda nodded her head. It seems you've been through a lot. You can hide out here if you don't mind. I stared at her, feeling the tears ready to pour again. How could she help someone she barely knew? Don't worry. She waved her hand at me as she stood from the bed. I have a lot of space and it's just me. We could say you are my daughter, and no one's going to bat an eye. Thank you, I muttered as she walked towards the door. You can thank me when this storm is all over. You can take some more soup from the kitchen if you aren't satisfied. This house is your home now as much as it is mine. I nodded at her, watching as she disappeared out the door. A few months passed by, and it hit me, starting with a wave of nausea, and I was out the door, pouring my stomach out. Granny Esmeralda, a name I had given her during my stay, stood, watching me with rapt attention. I guess I'm not feeling too well, I said as I leaned back into the room, staring at her. She continued looking with her eyes roaming my body. I don't think this is any type of sickness. What do you mean? I asked as I wrapped my hand around my body as her gaze made me feel uneasy. I turned around with another round of vomit escaping my throat. Granny Esmeralda turned around, walking away. Maybe we should wait until you cannot carry your weight and the weight of another being in your stomach. It dawned on me as I held my hand on my stomach. I am pregnant, I muttered, staring at Granny Esmeralda's back as she walked away. More months passed after I discovered in the worst way that I was pregnant. It seemed I could do less, only sitting in my room except for today as I stood next to her. Esmeralda smiled as she stood next to me, helping me spread the clothes on the clothesline. How's the child doing? I ran my hand over my bloating stomach. Pretty fine without the morning sickness, Granny Esmeralda. You should go inside. Let me handle the rest of the chores today, Granny Esmeralda said with a hand on my shoulder. I nodded, wobbling my way into the house until I was in my room. I stopped at the mirror, staring at my body. It was as she said as I carried my weight and the weight of another being. My stomach seemed to grow with every passing day. The sickness seemed to fade away, with fresh signs appearing until I felt something slip between my thighs. Granny! I screamed, puffing air as it seemed to become worse. Granny Esmeralda hurried into the room. Her eyes seemed round at the sight of me before a smile appeared on her face. Guess who is here? You? No. Mum. I'm hungry. My daughter, Diana, cried as she tugged at my hands in the middle of the street. I smiled as I stared at her, keeping my eye on the road as well. I had an eye around to watch out for any assassin, knowing my life was in constant danger. Wait for a while. We will head home soon. I pushed ahead, wanting to get what I needed and disappeared into the safety of Granny Esmeralda's place. Diana nodded, clinging to my hand when she cried out after bumping into someone. I stopped holding her in place. Can't you see where you are going? The words faded into my mouth as I stared at the figure in front of me. It can't be you. I stuttered as I saw his hand hanging on the hilt of his sword. It was the same man who had given me a choice in the forest 3 years ago. What is the problem? Another voice asked with a man standing next to this assassin. It felt like a dream as I was staring into the familiar emerald eyes I knew. The same feature Diana had as he looked at me. Landon. Aurora. Our lips calling our names at the same time. I turned around, picking Diana from the ground. The assassin's words repeated themselves in my head. I could not let Landon die, even if it meant I had to run away again. Stop, Landon said, holding me in place before I could run away. I struggled with my heart racing. Let me go, Landon. You are going to die if you try to make me stay here with you. Landon pulled me to himself, wrapping his hand around me. Nothing of that sort is going to happen. I pulled away from him with tears streaking down my cheeks. That man is going to kill one of us if I don't get away from you. Landon did not let me go, holding me to his chest while chuckling. You mean Casper? The one the council had sent to kill you or eliminate me if I refused to let you go. I pulled away from the chest. The man gave a curt bow with his hand on his chest. You know him? Landon chuckled as he took a glance at Casper before staring at me. It took a while, but I found out the truth. I have been searching for you for the past 2 years. Took a lot of bloodshed and cabinet cleaning before I could do anything substantial. Mama! Diana cried, pushing at me. Who's that? Landon pulled away. It seemed he hadn't seen the child I had tried to run away from. He chuckled when he realized she was talking about him. It seems you tried to move on away from me. I lowered my head, feeling my heart ache. I hadn't moved on, Landon. This is your child. Landon's eyes widened at my words. He stuttered as he stared at her. My child? He asked as he reached for her. I nodded at him with the tears pouring now. We were a spectacle as people stared at us, wondering what was happening. I discovered I was pregnant with her after I ran away. She is what the heavens blessed me with for what I thought I lost. Landon took her into his arms. What is your name, little cutie? He asked with his lips quivering. Diana. Diana said as she glanced at him. Diana. Landon repeated. His eyes never left her face. She has my eyes. I smiled at his words. Her resemblance to you is uncanny. I could only hope that one day it would be better. Mama, is this my daddy? Diana asked as she stuck her hand into Landon's hair, tugging at a handful. Yes, I said with a smile that was breaking out from my need to cry. This is your father. Diana smiled, staring at Landon, who returned the smile. Let's go home. Landon said as he held out his hand to me. My mate cannot be in an unknown land when her mate is Alpha. I stared at him, feeling everything happening at once. Was it possible I would be with the person I loved without a threat hanging above my head? Come on now, Aurora. Take my hand. Let's go home. Landon repeated with his hand, still waiting for me. I took his hand in mine, laughter breaking forth as he pulled me closer to him. Let's go home.
The end. Did you enjoy the story? Kindly leave your review in the comments and subscribe for more interesting stories. Lots of love.